Hi, good morning or good afternoon. This presentation is on a framework for software health management using Bayesian statistics. It's joint work between Yuning He and Johann Schumann at the NASA Ames Research Center. Large and complex software systems are becoming ubiquitous and increasingly critical. This can be seen with the cyber-physical systems like automotive, aerospace systems, medical systems, and also business systems, as well as social media and other large software systems. So these software systems often form a part of large software ecology, meaning software from various sources need to play together to provide the required functionality. Overall, these software systems have become much more critical, which means any malfunction of the software can either lead to loss of life or to loss of business opportunities or financial losses. So the big question is, how can we assure software health for such a software system? In general, a complex system can work safely only in certain regions of its state space. Just let's look at an aircraft. An aircraft only can fly at certain altitudes, at certain speeds. So when we look at the flight envelope of an aircraft here on the left-hand side, shown over the speed of the aircraft versus the load factor, there is a region, this cone-shaped region in the middle, where the aircraft is flying safely. If the aircraft is becoming too fast, or if the loads get too large, then the aircraft would enter this red region. This is the dangerous region, where the aircraft can sustain damage or, in worst case, break apart. So we have here these safe and unsafe regions of the state space, and the boundaries between the safe and unsafe regions, these are of interest for us. We call them safety boundaries. Here in this example it's very simple, only shown for two parameters, but in general these safety boundaries are in high-dimensional space. They can be nonlinear. Here you see already a couple of nonlinear boundaries, and usually with traditional methods they can be very hard to estimate. And also, if the system is changing or adapting, like for an aircraft, if the wing space is changing, like as some fighter aircraft can do, then the safety boundaries change. So this is kind of a physical system or a cyber-physical system. And now let's look how this looks for a complex software system. We also can say a complex software system can work safely only in certain regions of its state space. If you look at very close detail in the software, of course software is discrete, so we would have a very high-dimensional discrete state space. However, for our analysis and for our safety analysis, we model the software or the software ecosystem as a continuous system, also with a high-dimensional state space. For example, a continuous parameter describing such a system could be the CPU load in percent, the percent available memory, the percentage of lost packages. Using these, in some sense, abstractions of the discrete software system, we can perform reasoning and could for example, come up with a characterization of the good health of the system. Could be that the CPU load is always less than 90%, and the available memory should always be at least 10% memory available. Again, healthy regions are enclosed by boundaries. Here on the left hand we have a figure. There can be several areas where you have good health, and we have areas where you can have poor health. And these two dots in the middle correspond to points of operation. The blue point of operation is a point of operation where the system is kind of very healthy, surrounded by large spaces or regions where the system is still healthy, so a very good situation. On the other hand, the purple point of operation might be more questionable because it is already very close to an unsafe region. Why it is important to know about the location and the shape of these boundaries? We can identify three areas where it's important. One is for the design. If the designer knows about the boundaries and the locations of the boundaries, valuable feedback can come from this analysis to improve the design. Then, of course, such a design is important for verification and validation. You want to, in your requirement, or in your required operational space, you want to make sure that the system is healthy. And you also can use health regions to monitor and ensure safe systems operations. So we are providing a framework which allows us to identify and characterize such safety boundaries. Our testing framework uses hierarchical Bayesian statistical modeling with active learning in computer experiment design. Our overall system architecture is on the left-hand side. Here we have the software system. The software system is exercised and executed using a test case, and the system is executing, and our framework checks if the software can be considered healthy or not healthy based on this specific test case. What is healthy, what is not healthy is part of the health requirement. And this answer, if the software is healthy or not healthy, is used to incrementally improve and extend our statistical model. So, in an iterative fashion, we generate test cases to find regions where the software is not healthy as defined by the health requirements. Now, this, of course, could be done by fully exploring the state space. However, we said we have a high-dimensional state space and a continuous state space, so we cannot do this. Therefore, we are using active learning to select new test cases close to the estimated boundaries. This improves the efficiency of our search. And once our statistical model has been constructed, we can estimate geometric shapes of the boundaries to provide feedback to the designer and software health management systems. So let's look at some very small examples. These are just projection of safety boundaries into 2 and 3D parameter spaces. For example, here on the left-hand side, this was an example on some deep neural network learning software system for aircraft dynamics. Blue dots correspond to unsafe regions. Green dots correspond to test cases which resulted in safe cases. The shape, which is estimated by our framework, is this circle shown here. It's actually a cylinder. In the middle is another case study we did on an adaptive flight control system. Here the safety boundary forms a sphere or part of a sphere. Inside is a safe area and outside is an unsafe area. On the right hand side, health comparison for a deep neural network. You see here clearly a lot of data points at the boundaries where the green safe region is separated from the unsafe region. Now, how can we find data points which preferably are close to these estimated boundaries? And as I already said, for this we are using active learning, and we have defined a boundary-aware metric. It's a relatively complicated metric. The idea behind the metric is, with this metric, new test cases are proposed that are close to the suspected boundary, because we want to have test cases close to the suspected boundary here on the right-hand side in the figure. But it's not sufficient just to pick one point of the boundary and have a lot of data, no test cases around that point. We also need to move along the boundary so that we catch the entire boundary. That these A and B cases would be sufficient to just find one boundary, but we want to be able to find multiple boundaries, and in particular also potentially boundaries describing some kind of unsafe holes in a safe region, which is a particularly bad and dangerous situation, which is important to know about. So we also check and we generate test cases away from the boundary in high variance areas. This means in areas where potentially another safety boundary could be found. So let's come to this discussion. So far I presented our framework, which can find and characterize boundaries separating healthy from unhealthy regions. Our framework considers the software system or the system under test, which can be a complex software system or even a software ecosystem, as a black box, which means we don't need to restrict ourselves to certain kinds of architectures. We are able to efficiently explore high-dimensional spaces, and we can perform shape estimation for the safety boundaries which we find. And why are we doing this? One is we want to provide an effective feedback to the designer. The designer usually has a very good idea on how these boundary shapes might look like, but he or she doesn't know the location of the boundary. So a parameterized description of this shape can provide helpful feedback. And also these geometric shapes can be used as a basis for efficient software health monitoring. This means during design time or during verification validation, we estimate these boundaries, describe these boundaries. Then these descriptions very much parameterized curves, can easily be used inside health monitors to quickly determine if the software is healthy or not. So in this way, we are able to support system verification and validation. Now, this is the current state, but there's a lot more things to do. In particular, large and complex systems and software ecosystems, they are not static systems, which means they have been compiled once and forever, but there's a lot of changes in there, dynamic loading of components, rearranging of architectures, all sorts of dynamic things going on. Still, for safe operations, you need to know the location of the safety regions. So our framework uses a hierarchical Bayesian statistical modeling, learning model, which is particularly suited for dynamical models. The underlying algorithms used in our learning model are particle filters, though they are specifically suitable for learning dynamic systems. Of course, we have to generate and execute test cases. Our active learning is suitable for generating a low number of new test cases, and these test cases are, with a high probability, very relevant to finding the safe region. And we are also using our Bayesian model to be able to represent uncertainties coming in through potentially uncertainties of inputs, sensors, potentially failures inside a big software system, and also to deal with time-dependent information and time series information. Thank you very much for listening.